No, that wasn't a cutscene from Call of Duty or footage from a foreign country we invaded. That video was filmed in Paramount, California. And even though mainstream media is showing you images of violent rioting and cars being set on fire to justify this response from authorities, the truth is that these protests were peaceful until the cops showed up. And that's when all hell broke loose, which is how it typically goes. As Olivia Rosane of Common Dreams explains, the protests kicked off Friday in opposition to ICE raids of retail establishments around Los Angeles. During Friday's protests, David Huerta, president of SEIU California and SEIU United Service Workers West, was injured and then arrested while observing a raid. His arrest sparked further arrests, which carried over into Saturday in response to apparent ICE activity in the nearby city of Paramount. Saturday's most dramatic protest occurred outside a Home Depot in Paramount following rumors of an ICE raid there. According to the LA Times, the Home Depot protests began peacefully until officers lobbed flashbang grenades and pepper balls at the crowd, after which some individuals responded by throwing rocks and other objects at the ICE cars, and one person drove their vehicle toward the ICE agents. Quote, many of the protesters did not appear to engage in these tactics, the LA Times reported. So in response to raids from Trump's Gestapo, members of the community showed up to protect their immigrant neighbors, resulting in a clash with ICE. But to be clear, the violence is disproportionately coming from authorities, despite what the media tells you. For example, when two attorneys asked dozens of officers in military fatigues to see a warrant, tear gas canisters were thrown their way. Also, multiple LAPD officers on horseback are seen here stepping on a protester and knocking him down when he clearly poses no threat to them. And this is one of many videos of law enforcement officers using violence against people. And they're so shameless that they shot an Australian reporter with a rubber bullet during a live broadcast.
After hours of standing off, this situation has now rapidly deteriorated. The LAPD moving in on horseback, firing rubber bullets at protesters, moving them on through the heart of LA.
You just shut the fuck up! You okay?
I'm good.
Are you okay?
That's what they're doing in broad daylight. And one of the protesters who was hit with tear gas described things perfectly.
You told me you got caught up in the tear gas as well. Describe what happened to you.
Oh, just tasted a little tear gas. Tasted like fascism.
I'd imagine. So the overwhelming majority of people at these protests are defending their community from an actual invasion by the federal Gestapo that is making all of them feel less safe. But if you tune in to, say, Fox News, you get a completely different perspective.
You know, let's hope that no one is hurt and no one is injured and it doesn't escalate from here. Look at the flag. Yeah, Guy, I see
there it is.
You
Mexican
it out.
flag can,
this is criminal activity that I hope is people are held accountable for. And I'm talking about the riots right here.
Where are the cops?
Yeah.
Well, there's one Mexican flag, therefore that's definitive proof that there's an immigrant invasion. It's not ICE that's invading these communities. It's immigrants that's invading these communities. You see, when you see politicians with Israeli or Ukrainian flags or rednecks with Confederate flags, that's not evidence of an invasion. But Mexican Americans waving a Mexican flag, that's inherently problematic for reasons. Sure. So what always happens is the media highlights isolated instances of violence from protesters while ignoring police violence, which then provokes a harsher response against all of the protesters, even though the overwhelming majority of them are peaceful, despite violence being perpetrated against them. And needless to say, tensions were already high, but Trump came in and made things exponentially worse, purposefully so. And as I'm sure you all know by now, he invoked Title 10 to seize control of California's National Guard, but he did this without the consent of the governor, which means that it's illegal. And it's why Gavin Newsom is suing the Trump administration. Either way, 2,000 members, as of right now, of California's National Guard have been seized by Trump, and they've been deployed to the streets of California. But that's not all, because Trump is also considering invoking the Insurrection Act. And at the time that I record this video, Marines have been placed on standby, and CNN actually reports that 500 of them have officially been mobilized, and they're ready to be deployed to Los Angeles, although the rules of engagement are still reportedly being worked out because nobody even knows what they would do. And as Washington Post reporter Dan Lamothe points out here, we're talking about a Marine infantry unit on the ground in California. And this escalation comes after the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, raised the specter of sending U.S. Marines to the streets of LA to presumably put them against the U.S. citizens that they theoretically signed up to protect. And just in case this wasn't obvious, it is incredibly ominous for the Defense Secretary of the United States to weigh in on domestic matters like this. And you know it's bad when the LAPD released a statement explaining that most of the protests were peaceful and they had it under control. And that was their way of signaling to Trump that they didn't want his help. They didn't need the National Guard there. But as Bernie Sanders puts it, this is all part of Trump's plan, which is straight out of the authoritarian playbook, where he provokes a counter-response with aggressive illegal ICE raids, declares a state of emergency after antagonizing local communities, then he calls in the troops. So when LAPD and even the governor of California, who are no allies to protesters, mind you, ask Trump to not intervene here, they're tacitly acknowledging that Trump's goal is to pour gasoline on the fire in order to make things worse, so as to create a justification to expand his power by invoking either the Insurrection Act or possibly even martial law. And to be clear, the goal is to antagonize these communities. That is deliberate here. ICE knows what they're doing. They're doing raids on elementary school graduations. They raided a birthday party back in January. They've been posing as electric companies to illegally gain entry into people's homes without warrants. They've lingered around courthouses to abduct people after their cases have been dismissed. And these are just a few of many examples. People do not feel comfortable with members of their own community being kidnapped by men wearing masks, getting put in unmarked vehicles, and taken away to who knows where. And the goal here is to be as ruthless as possible, to terrorize immigrant communities and get them to self-deport. And listen, they were never just targeting criminals. I feel like that's very obvious by now. But they've even given up the pretense by now altogether that that was the goal, because they just want to strike fear in the hearts of everyone.
Is everyone that has been arrested by ICE agents have a criminal record like those you've described?
Absolutely not. And I said from day one, January 20th, we will prioritize public safety threats and national security threats. However, we will enforce law.
So what fascist Elmer Fudd is saying here is that ICE, much like the Gestapo, will hunt down innocent people wherever they are. In schools, churches, stores, restaurants, homes. It doesn't matter. They don't give a fuck. They don't care about the Constitution. They'll gladly trample over people's civil liberties because they don't give a damn. The goal is to terrorize communities. But because of their overt lawlessness, communities have started to mobilize in response, and these communities have been very effective at stopping ICE. Case in point, in New York, an ICE van was forced to retreat after New Yorkers peacefully assembled to protect the immigrants that they were after. And in Minneapolis, community members showed up in force to protect a beloved taqueria that was being raided by ICE, which heavily impeded their efforts. So the Trump administration is clearly escalating in response to the resistance that they're facing in communities, but oftentimes local authorities do coordinate with ICE and DHS to assist them in their invasion of their own communities, which is why LAPD was likely caught off guard by Trump's intervention here, since they're already on the same side. But Trump is stepping up because the mass mobilization against ICE raids is inhibiting his mass deportation agenda, and he's now making it clear that he will turn the entire country into a fucking war zone if you don't let his Gestapo terrorize your communities. And he issued this threat while talking to reporters.
Well, we're going to have troops everywhere. We're not going to let this happen to our country. We're not going to let our country be torn apart like it was under Biden and his auto pen.
What's the bar for sending Marines?
The bar is what I think it is. I mean, if we see danger to our country and to our citizens, we'll be very, very strong in terms of law and order. It's about law and order.
This is dictatorship. He just threatened to put troops everywhere in the United States. He's saying the troops who are supposed to theoretically be protecting us are going to be on the streets to intimidate us, to watch us, to make sure that we don't get out of line. Why? Because he's in control, and he wants you to know that. It's a message. And when he was asked what the bar was for invoking the Insurrection Act or sending in the Marines, he said the bar is what I think it is. See, that's not how it's supposed to work, but he's saying I can do whatever the fuck I want, and if I want to use the military to intimidate U.S. citizens, that's what the fuck I'm going to do. And it's ironic that a man found guilty of 34 felonies who pardoned 1,500 insurrectionists has the audacity to complain about law and order now. It's bullshit, and we all know that it's not about that. It's about consolidating power, and as much as I loathe Gavin Newsom, I've got to give him credit for explaining this to his constituents.
He's not for peacemaking. He's here for war. He wants a civil war on the streets of America, not just here. He's testing the boundaries by nationalizing the federal guard. Heck, his own great Kristi Noem was just a year ago sitting there with newsmaker Sean Hannity saying it's outrageous that Biden is considering nationalizing the guard in my great state. Kristi Noem, the same Kristi Noem, saying, what about state sovereignties and state rights? And where the hell is Hannity now? Where the hell is Kristi Noem? They're out there just singing the siren songs of chaos, trying to sow chaos and putting our democracy at risk. These are acts of authoritarians. Period, full stop.
And he's 100% right. And I hope that he now understands how dangerous it was for him to try to appease fascists. Because even though he chummed it up with Trump's cronies like Charlie Kirk and Steve Bannon, it didn't buy him a shred of goodwill with this administration. In fact, Tom Homan threatened to arrest him. And you know things are bad when a governor is accusing a president of trying to incite a civil war, and the president is threatening said governor with arrest. But thankfully, Gavin Newsom's response to the threat of arrest was exactly what it should have been, which was to not back down.
He did not rule out literally arresting you, nor Mayor Bass, if you interfere in his words. He said you hadn't yet.
He's a tough guy. Why doesn't he do that? He knows where to find me. But you know what? Let your hands off 4-year-old girls that are trying to get educated. Let your hands off these poor people. They're just trying to live their lives, man. Trying to live their lives, paying their taxes, been here 10 years. The fear, the horror. The hell is this guy? Come after me, arrest me. Let's just get it over with. Tough guy. You know, I don't give a damn. But I care about my community. I care about this community. The hell are they doing? These guys need to grow up. They need to stop. And we need to push back. And I'm sorry to be so clear, but that kind of bloviating is exhausting. So, Tom, arrest me. Let's go.
Look, credit where it's due. Was it performative? Absolutely. Would a potential arrest by Trump give him something to brag about during the 2028 Democratic Party presidential primary? Of course. It's cynical, sure. Having said that, this is the response needed from all Democratic leaders at all times. And I've got to say, he's disproving his own fascist appeasement strategy in real time, because after he called Tom Homan's bluff, guess what happened? Tom Homan backed down.
Arrest me. Let's go. That was the governor of California talking to you.
Look, I'm not biting on that. The NBC reporter that interviewed me very dishonest. We did a 20-minute interview, and he cuts out a little clip that makes me and takes my words out of context. Here's what we said. And he talked about when I talked about these people that are these protests and rioting. When they cross the line, they got that. Well, here's why I said they have a right to protest. They have the First Amendment rights, but they can't cross that line. They can't cross that line of impediment. They can't cross that line of putting their hands on officers. They can't cross the line of knowing and concealing and illegal alien, because they're all federal crimes. They're in statute, and they will be prosecuted. When he asked the questions that include Mayor Bass and Governor Newsom, I was clear. They haven't crossed the line, but they're not above the law either. If they commit a crime, they certainly would ask for prosecution. That's what was happening. I never threatened to arrest Governor Newsom, so I'm not biting off on that. It's just that reporter's dishonest, and let him play the whole 20-minute interview, and you'll see a whole different discussion that we had.
This is why you never try to appease fascists. You stand up to them, because they're fundamentally cowards at the end of the day. They hide behind the threat of state power to puff up their chests, to scare people, but it doesn't change the fact that these are weak, deeply insecure pussies. And a paper tiger like Tom Homan doesn't want to deal with the legal ramifications of illegally detaining a fucking U.S. governor, because unlike Donald Trump, he actually isn't above the law. But Trump, who can get away with anything since the Supreme Court gave him unlimited immunity, actually does support the idea of Newsom getting arrested, because he knows that there's nothing that's going to lead to him being held accountable for detaining somebody who is a U.S. governor. That's why he's in favor of it.
He's daring Tom Homan to come and arrest him. Should he do it? I would do it if I were Tom. I think it's great. Gavin likes the publicity, but I think it would be a great thing.
So the president wants to arrest a sitting U.S. governor for no legitimate reason. This is obviously dictator shit. And if you were on the fence about whether or not Trump actually wants to be a dictator, here's your answer. But this is what it's come to. This is what happens when you elect fascists as president, America. And ironically, this administration says that they have to arrest innocent immigrants and crack down hard on peaceful protesters because something law and order. And they're hoping that you forget that this is the same guy that incited an insurrection on the US fucking Capitol. See, it's not about law and order, it's about power. And Trump's goal is to stoke and exploit civil unrest to consolidate power even further. But he's not the only one with power. And that's what this situation is teaching everyone. These protesters are demonstrating that they also have power. Power rests with the people. And as easy as it is to clutch your pearls over isolated instances of violence here and there, especially after the media kind of works people into a fucking frenzy, at the end of the day, you have to recognize that these protesters have been extremely effective. In response to ICE's invasion, the city of Glendale announced that it is terminating its contract with ICE. And even though they should have never had one with them in the first place, it goes to show you that Americans are not powerless. Fascism can be defeated, but only if the fascists know that Americans are not going to fucking take it. And seeing as how so many communities have thwarted ISIS terrorism, it goes to show you that not all hope is lost. Maybe Americans are willing to stand up and fight for their democracy. Either way, we're reaching a critical moment where members of the United States military are going to have to decide whether or not to uphold the oath that they took. There may come a time in the very near future, perhaps this week, when the National Guard or perhaps members of U.S. Marines are going to be unleashed on U.S. citizens. And if they choose to follow unlawful orders and attack citizens, they need to understand that they are fascist collaborators who are no better than the Nazis who are simply saying that they're following orders as a justification for what they did during World War II. And this is the exact message that protesters are sending loud and clear right now to members of the National Guard. For example, Twitter user Brody shared this picture of two posters hung up at a bus stop. One says, "Make it hard to be a Nazi now, or soon they will make it dangerous to not be a Nazi." And the other addresses the National Guard directly, saying, "Dear National Guard, please don't shoot your fellow citizens to hold up a racist dictator who thinks you are a sucker." Well said. And I hate that it may come to this, but now is the time for members of the U.S. military to decide which side they're on. They actually have to do some soul searching and ask themselves if they signed up to occupy U.S. cities and if fellow Americans really are their enemies. And on that note, I want to leave you with a really powerful video featuring one protester whose message to National Guard members feels like a moment that may end up in the history books. So enjoy.
Feel tough with your assault rifles and your sticks. You should be standing here with us. You're on the wrong side of history. We know you got a job to do, but you took an oath to the Constitution, not to the fascists in the White House. Think about what you're doing now. Think about what this means. Coming into our community. Peaceful fucking community. People working their jobs. They send in men in military fatigues. Weapons of war. Into our communities, and you stand here and you allow it. I am sick and tired of it. You should be sick and tired of it. You think any of these people in the White House sending you these commands give a fuck about you? Not one of them do. They laugh at you. Our president laughs at you. He calls you fools. He said the people who died overseas in the military were chumps. That's who you're defending right now. Think about your place in history, ladies and gentlemen. Ask yourself when you wake up tomorrow. I don't know if you have kids. Ask yourself the future you want for your children. Is it this? You can answer me. Is it this? Do you feel good about this?